As Nigeria battles the coronavirus pandemic, there are concerns that funds raised by the government, corporate bodies, and individuals are at the risk of being misappropriated. By the middle of May 2020, over 40 billion naira had been donated by both corporate and individual Nigerians for the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic in Nigeria. This amount is exclusive of the 10 billion naira grant to the Lagos state government and the 48 million from the African Development Fund for the training of health workers. In addition, a number of governments from around the world have donated hospital equipment, personal protective equipment, and even whole hospitals and treatment centers to reduce the pressure on the government's resources in providing these needed facilities. The Central Bank of Nigeria has provided special funds to help stimulate the economy and prevent small businesses from going under. This is part of the strategy to contain the loss of jobs occasioned by border closure, global economic downturn, and the general economic inactivity resulting from the COVID-19 lockdown. The Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission (ICPC) has now raised worries that with the emergency situation created by the COVID-19 pandemic, unscrupulous and corrupt officials could use the situation as cover to mismanage or steal the COVID-19 funds.
Whatever way you look at it, you always find situations where people find a way to benefit, irrespective of the fact that corruption, COVID affects every single person in this country directly or indirectly. And it's unfortunate that in a time where people should be digging deep and bringing up that well of goodness, that how do we get together to build the economy? We know what our financial situation is in Nigeria at this time. How do we get together to build the economy? How do we get together to put structure and facilities that are useful, that are effective, that are efficient? We are worrying about how much money we can take away from the system, how we can rob the system blind. And it's a very sad case, really. Yeah, it is.
On 31st of March 2020, the ICPC issued an advisory warning the federal government, its ministries, departments, and agencies against disrespecting the procurement process or making purchases in excess of any financial limits.
So the first thing the Commission did was to issue an advisory to the government and MDAs against jettishing due process in the management of COVID-19 relief funds. It is natural in situations like this, in emergency situation, you have to, buy, materials, buy, relief items. For the general public and what have you. Ministries like Ministry of Health, Ministry of Humanitarian Services, and what have you, they have to engage with vendors outside in supply and purchase of goods and services. So, and during the period, it is usually due process is not strictly observed, because they call it emergency, procurement. So because of that, we are aware that, because of that issue of emergency procurement, some people may use that window to perpetuate, evils, by, stealing or diverting the, funds meant to fight the pandemic.
However, some officials of the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and the National Emergency Management Agency (NEMA) are allegedly being fingered in the diversion of relief materials meant as palliatives for the poorest of the poor in many states. Some other agencies are also being accused of making purchases whose costs cannot be justified.
And then you have a situation where you have MDAs are capitalizing on the emergency nature of COVID to find loopholes, to rob the system. So you have the Public Procurement Act, Section 42 and 43, that allows for procurement, emergency procurement in situations that capture COVID. and it says go to do direct procurement, ensure accountability and transparency. But unfortunately, we have people that are defining transparency and accountability in a way that suits them. And I am glad that the ICPC and the NOA are thinking through this. The ICPC is an anti-corruption agency, and you see in all the work that has been ongoing prior to COVID that the ICPC is serious about reducing the corruption in Nigeria and reducing the effects of corruption. So it's interesting when you see this, when you talk about emergency procurement, and it's very valid when you worry about it with regards to corruption and the loopholes that are possible. The second thing is, how does it affect us as a country? Let me give an instance. If the emergency procurements that are ongoing right now do not go through a proper validation process, if it doesn't go through proper rules, if it's not open and disclosable to the public, the first thing you'll find is that contracts are awarded to cronies, because there is that 6 weeks notice of publication, all the procedures that come through open competitive bidding has already been suspended because of emergency procurement. The second thing you will find that services will probably not be delivered, or inefficient services will be provided, or beneficiaries of the projects would not get what government has stipulated or planned for them, or the contracts may not even be carried out, but funds will be released. And those are the worrying things about the emergency procurement and COVID.
There are also queries on transparency and accountability in the disbursement of cash and material palliatives to families in the country, with many northern states being allegedly favored.
The food because they cannot be treated as a refugee. We are not in the slavery land, but the food they brought to us is like we are living in a refugee camp in our own land. So how can that work out? So that is the reason. So what is really happening, the government are not helping. They cook a food of concussion rice, the food that is not relevant for the citizen. So we cannot be treated like the refugee. We are not a refugee.
Meanwhile, most states in the southeast, as well as Rivers, Delta, Bayelsa, and Cross River states, have raised complaints that their citizens are not getting the cash relief promised by the federal government, with many of the youths calling for the use of bank accounts for the disbursement of the funds to the poor, if transparency is to be guaranteed. However, what seems most critical is the implication of corruption, whether institutional or individual corruption, for the management of the resources meant to be applied to contain the COVID-19 pandemic.
COVID is coming at a time when, despite all the reforms that have gone through into the security sector, we are yet to see the benefits of those efforts. And it's unfortunate that we haven't also realized that this 50 naira that we collect, this 100 naira we collect, we allow opportunities for COVID to spread. COVID does not recognize us as individuals. It doesn't recognize us as civilians or security operators. Neither does it recognize us as rich or poor. It takes hold irrespective of your status, irrespective of your sector, irrespective of who you are. And I do agree that I do share the worries of the NOA in the sense that interstate travels were banned to allow states control the spread of COVID, to allow states protect the citizens within their borders. And if you have that process being undermined by security sector agents, by police, by armed officials, it's unfortunate, because what it would mean is that at some point the spread of COVID will go further than Nigeria is capable of taking care of. And all the steps that have been taken to curb the spread, to reduce interstate transfer of COVID, would have been efforts that are wasted.
In addition to the effective management of the COVID-19 challenge in Nigeria, an accountable application of resources earmarked for the pandemic will also address some anti-corruption issues under the Buhari administration. For instance, how equitably were the funds administered? How well did the government meet international best practices? How far did the funds meet the health challenges of victims of the pandemic? These are questions begging for answers.